The protagonist of our story gained an ability that enabled him to copy the skills of anyone simply by shaking their hand. Due to this powerful ability, many pursued him, and he was on the verge of losing his life. However, by using one of the rare elements, he managed to travel back in time and decided to correct the mistakes of the past. How will he protect himself and his family in his new life, and will he succeed in doing so? This is what we will uncover in today's story. The story begins in the future, specifically on August 17, 2035, in the South Korean capital, Seoul. It has been 5 years since the great catastrophe struck humanity on August 17, 2030. This calamity was triggered by the emergence of portals that unleashed monsters across the globe, appearing everywhere. Since then, humanity has become prey to these creatures, suffering severe decline due to their relentless invasions. The protagonist, Choi Jin-hyuk, was sitting on a rooftop, waiting for a specific event to occur. He was reflecting on the state of the world and the survival prospects of the remaining 40% of humanity still alive. Suddenly, he felt an unusual movement behind him and turned to investigate. He saw several monsters below the building where he sat. Counting them, he identified 6 mid to high tier C-class monsters and 1 A-class monster. This was exactly as his older brother, Ji Cheol, had described. Jin used his binoculars to observe the area carefully, knowing the event he had been waiting for was about to happen. Everything Ji Cheol had told him was about to become a reality. Suddenly, a surge of energy appeared, forming something strange, which Jin closely monitored. He realized this energy was due to the formation of what is known as a sudden portal. He was correct. Within seconds, a massive dimensional portal had materialized. He was intrigued by the rumors that people could emerge from such portals, though it seemed highly unlikely based on its appearance. Contrary to his expectations, human hands and feet emerged from the portal. A person jumped out, struggling to escape and finally succeeding. After calming down, the individual took a deep breath and stood upright. He was overjoyed to have returned and began shouting in celebration, relieved to have finally escaped the dimension he had been trapped in because of the portal. However, his happiness was short-lived, as the C-class monsters Jin had seen earlier, along with the A-class monster, noticed a human presence and charged toward him to devour him. The person, realizing the danger, cursed his bad luck, lamenting that he couldn't even have 5 minutes of peace. What keeps attracting these creatures to me? Will they never stop chasing me? He grumbled. Jin, on the other hand, became excited upon seeing this individual, recognizing that this was the moment he had been anticipating all morning. The monsters began their ruthless attack on the man who had emerged from the portal. Jin observed with delight, refraining from intervening to help. He knew the man didn't need assistance, and watched as he single-handedly defeated many of them. The man used his unique technique, Sword Cradle, to eliminate the remaining monsters. This technique was highly effective, despite the situation requiring at least 10 high-level hunters to handle such a number of monsters. Though severely injured, he spared no effort in taking them down. He unleashed powerful spells and combat techniques to fend off the creatures, preventing them from advancing further. In just 1 hour, he had eliminated 6 C-class monsters, an extraordinary feat for any hunter. Even Jin, observing from a distance, was amazed and astounded by the man's ability to handle such numbers alone. Now, only the strongest monster remained, the A-class boss, awaiting a final showdown. This monster was so formidable that even all 5 S-class hunters in the world combined would find defeating it nearly impossible or exceedingly difficult. Jin watched these events unfold with intense excitement, despite having heard about them many times before. Hearing about such events was one thing, but witnessing them was an entirely different experience, especially since the true power of the Master of Clones was about to be revealed, and Jin would finally see the astonishing abilities for which he was renowned. If he waited just a little longer, this incredible power would rightfully become his. The A-class monster launched its attack, but fortunately, the hunter managed to evade it. Using his magical energy, he leapt away from the attack and soared into the air. He then enhanced the impact of his powerful strike, channeling it toward the monster with relentless force. This technique, known as Demon Blade, was sharp and precise, capable of slicing through anything. Even the monster's tough, durable body was no exception, and the hunter managed to cut it down in a single blow. The monster fell to the ground immediately, its body beginning to disintegrate. Jin observed that the battle had concluded, and it was an awe-inspiring, breathtaking display beyond comprehension. He decided it was time to descend and initiate his plan, heading toward the hunter who had collapsed from exhaustion. Upon reaching him, Jin thought to himself that everything so far resembled what Ji Cheol had described. Jin shook the hunter gently, asking if he was okay or feeling anything unusual. He recalled Ji Cheol telling him that he had saved the hunter that day and acquired his powers immediately afterward. The hunter began regaining consciousness, coughing heavily from exhaustion, fatigue, and his severe injuries. Jin felt confused, unsure how to assist him, and wished he had asked his brother for more details. Finally, the hunter spoke with great difficulty, asking Jin about the exact year. Jin replied that it was August 2035. The hunter struggled to stand, looking distressed and sorrowful. He then exclaimed in frustration that he had spent nearly 30 years in the dungeon, whereas only 5 years had passed here. Jin tried to calm him down, urging him not to exert himself due to the severity of his injuries, and suggesting he lie down again. The hunter replied that it was far too late for that. Jin understood this well, certain that the hunter would die that day no matter what. The hunter continued, explaining that all of this happened because he had expended most of his power trying to reopen the portal. He laughed bitterly, a sound filled with sorrow, which stirred a deep sense of despair in Jin, who remained silent, saying nothing further. The hunter made a specific request, pulling out a picture of his family and asking Jin to find them and take good care of them, as they might still be alive. Jin responded, saying that it was a significant loss since he wasn't in a position to care for anyone at the moment. The hunter replied that he wasn't making the request without reason. He would grant Jin his powers in exchange. However, to transfer his power, he needed to know Jin's first name. Jin hesitated, remaining silent as he pondered why he had come here in the first place. The hunter, running out of time, introduced himself as Park Kang-ho and asked Jin for his name again. Jin recalled his past and the events that had driven him to anticipate something like this. He remembered how he had been threatened by one of the hunters he had a bad relationship with, Jonathan, who had infiltrated Jin's secret hideout in June 2058, about 23 years from now. The hunter shouted at Jin, daring him to try escaping their grasp once again. At that time, Jin possessed the ability to copy the powers of any hunter, but he was severely injured, with serious wounds covering most of his body. Jin replied that it seemed there would be no escape this time, and asked the hunter, Jonathan, who had revealed his location. Jonathan answered that the villain, Cha Jin-soo, ranked 16th, had sold him out after striking a deal worth $1 million. Cha Jin-soo had promised not to pursue Jin for a year, but the moment he received the money, he betrayed Jin and disclosed his whereabouts. Upon hearing this, Jin felt furious, realizing he had been deceived. Jonathan added that now, having obtained the answers he sought, it was time to end Jin's life. Jin bowed his head, recalling the deaths of his parents, the false accusations that led to his imprisonment, and the car accident that took his brothers. He felt as though he had already lost everything. Jin pulled a small magical stone from his pocket and asked Jonathan if he recognized it. Jonathan's expression turned to shock, fearing the stone was precisely what he thought it might be. Jin continued, explaining that the stone was the legendary artifact whispered about far and wide, known as the Stone of Return. At the mention of the stone's name, Jonathan flew into a rage and commanded his subordinates to kill Jin immediately before he could activate it. But it was too late, as the stone had already begun to work. Jin chuckled weakly, addressing Jonathan, "I'll see you in the past," as he wished the stone would take him back to a time when his brothers were still alive. Jin's memories of his past and the events that shaped him came rushing back, and he resolved to follow through with his plan. Finally, he replied to Kang's question, revealing that his real name was Choi Jin-hyuk. He extended his hand to Kang, who felt a sense of relief at reaching an agreement. Kang began fulfilling their agreement, using his power to transfer the system. This time, the future belonged to Choi Jin-hyuk. As the process began, the system issued a warning that the transfer of power would result in the complete destruction of Kang's body. Kang laughed maniacally, saying he was going to die anyway, and demanded the transfer continue. Minutes later, the system confirmed the successful transfer to Choi Jin-hyuk's body, with the data being added progressively. The system analyzed its new host, incrementally integrating skills and abilities. Jin looked at Kang's lifeless body on the ground and heard a warning from him not to let his guard down. Despite the successful transfer, caution was essential to prevent it from being undone at any moment. Startled, Jin asked Kang what he meant by this, but he suddenly felt the presence of something behind him. He turned quickly to find an A-class monster that hadn't died yet. Kang laughed bitterly, saying, "Life is truly full of surprises." The monster roared with fury, preparing to attack Jin and Kang, threatening the success of the transfer. Kang remarked that, in fairy tales, heroes return home to live in peace. Then he called out to Jin, who was looking around in panic, and said he had completely lost hope. He urged Jin to flee before it was too late, suggesting that this bad luck was preferable to losing his life here. Kang added that this world was chaotic, and if they wanted to survive, they would have to adapt to its madness. However, Kang was stunned when he saw Jin gripping a metallic object and staring at the monster. Kang asked in disbelief what Jin was thinking, exclaiming, "What madness is this?" Jin replied that he had never been more rational and aware than he was now, adding that he was tired of running and hiding repeatedly. The massive monster approached them, staring at them without attacking. When it finally reached Jin, he stood ready for whatever might happen. To their surprise, the monster left without doing anything. Yu was puzzled by this, but felt grateful that he wouldn't have to engage in a deadly battle that day. Kang remarked that they were incredibly lucky, but Jin responded that the credit went to him. Jin explained that the monster hadn't attacked because it was severely injured. However, Jin was taken aback as he noticed Kang's body beginning to fade away gradually. Kang urged Jin to fulfill his promise to find and protect his family. He warned Jin that if he broke his promise, he would never forgive him and would curse him even in death. With that, Kang vanished entirely, and 100% of the system's data was transferred to Choi Jin-hyuk's new body. Though Jin had anticipated this outcome, he still felt profound sadness. Suddenly, an excruciating pain surged through his body, as if his bones were shattering. This marked the beginning of his awakening process. Despite knowing it would be painful, he hadn't expected it to be this intense. It felt as though every bone in his body was breaking and reforming, and his muscles were tearing apart. Jin screamed in agony as the awakening process continued. After a harrowing night, a cart passed through the abandoned city. The driver, enjoying the warm sunshine, appeared relatively cheerful. Spotting a familiar figure, he recognized Jin. He was surprised to see Jin in such a place, and wondered what he was carrying and where he was headed. Jin sensed someone nearby and turned to find the driver looking at him. Smiling, Jin recognized the driver as his friend, Ki Cheol, and asked what had brought him here. Kai responded with curiosity, saying it was he who should be asking that question, especially since it was his day off after switching shifts with Jin the previous night. Jin laughed awkwardly and explained that he had to return here but got into trouble with monsters and ended up stuck until morning. Kai reacted angrily, exclaiming, "How could you stay here all night? Are you crazy? or do you have a death wish? Jin laughed and asked him to stop lecturing, assuring him that everything turned out fine, and that thanks to Bang Bang, he had hit the jackpot. Jin then asked why Ki was here so early, pointing out that it was still too early for work, and inquired about the rest of the team. Kai replied that he had recently started waking up early, which was why he was heading to work earlier than usual. He added that the rest of the team was on their way. Jin chuckled but sensed that Kai was, as always, hiding something. After all, Park Ki-cheol, the leader of Team Hyena for the day, was the original owner of the copying ability that Jin had stolen. The primary copying ability allowed its wielder to replicate and use the skills of other awakened individuals. However, Ki-cheol wasn't particularly skilled at utilizing it. In his previous life, this limitation led to him being gradually hunted down by other awakened individuals until, one day, his body was found in an abandoned building. Jin climbed into the vehicle and told Ki-cheol he would be heading off first, bidding him farewell and wishing him a good day. On the way, Jin began reflecting on how Ki-cheol's downfall in the past was primarily due to his exposure as an awakened individual with the ability to copy skills. This revelation had caused unrest within the awakened community, as his ability to replicate their powers effortlessly made him a significant threat. However, Jin had devised a plan to ensure he wouldn't face the same fate as Ki-cheol. Glancing to his side, Jin noticed 3 B-class magical crystals and 4 C-class ones. He felt a twinge of guilt, knowing that Ki-cheol would no longer be able to find them, but he convinced himself that these crystals could save his life, leaving him with no choice but to take them. The problem now was that he didn't know how to use them properly. If he sold just one, he could retire comfortably, but he wasn't willing to sell them, rendering them practically useless for now. Nevertheless, these crystals were incredibly rare. Jin recalled Ki-cheol's words from his past life, shortly after Jin had acquired Kang's power. Ki-cheol had expressed deep frustration at his inability to secure any magical stones. Ki-cheol had mentioned that when he returned the next day, none of the crystals were there, infuriating him because no one else had been around at the time. The more Jin reflected on the past, the more he remembered Ki-cheol's deep regret over failing to secure those crystals. For this reason, Jin decided not to repeat the same mistake. After acquiring Kang's power, he began collecting such crystals early. Particularly if the crystals were monster cores, he knew they had to be sold in utmost secrecy. If he were caught selling or possessing high-grade magical energy stones, the Awakened Association and the government would launch an investigation into their source. In the worst-case scenario, he might not even receive full value for them, and could be forced to sell them at a meager price. Even worse, he could be targeted and end up as a lifeless body in an abandoned building. The only solution to this problem was to register quickly as one of the Awakened. Jin called his friend Kang Cheol-min, who jokingly answered, asking what could have prompted such a busy man like Jin to call him. Jin responded cheerfully, saying he had unexpectedly come into some money and thought of spending an enjoyable evening with a dear friend. Cheol-min laughed, saying he couldn't believe Jin was not only going out with him but treating him as well. Jin replied that he had made some money, and this was the least he could do, but he added that it wouldn't be for free. He needed a small favor in return. Jin then visited a local shop in his area and presented the items he had collected to the merchant, asking about their value. The merchant replied that the items were somewhat useful and offered him $600 for all of them. Jin, feeling dissatisfied, argued that it was tough to find decent items these days and demanded a better price. The merchant responded, saying that these items had once fetched as much as $800 in the past, but now things were difficult due to the sharp decline in people seeking expensive goods like these. He added that the population was steadily decreasing, and rising costs were making people more cautious about how they spent their money. At that moment, 2 children ran toward Jin, crying and calling out to him. When they reached him, they hugged him tightly and broke into heavy sobs, saying they were terrified when he didn't return home the previous night and thought he had abandoned them forever. Jin tried to calm them down, asking them to stop crying and talk to him first. He asked why they were out so early and why they hadn't gone to school yet. The merchant interjected, questioning why Jin was scolding the children, pointing out that they had spent the night worrying about him and couldn't sleep because of his absence. The merchant added that while money is important, Jin should also consider the emotional impact his absence might have on the children if anything happened to him. Noticing that the children were still crying, Jin reassured them in a soothing tone that there was nothing to worry about. The children wiped their tears and said they had stopped crying. At that, Jin told them to go inside and prepare some meat for lunch. Their faces lit up with joy, and they showed great enthusiasm for the meal. The little girl, Cheol Yoon-jung, approached Jin and told him that the grandmother living upstairs had asked to see him when he returned. Jin asked if she meant the landlady, and Yoon-jung confirmed, adding that the grandmother had mentioned overdue rent. Jin went upstairs with the children to their room, 601. He prepared a large lunch with many delicious dishes. The children ate with gusto and happiness, but Jin noticed that the grandmother wasn't eating. The grandmother asked Jin why he had made such a feast and what the occasion was. Jin replied that he had thought of her while passing by the butcher. The grandmother remarked that she had expected him to save the money and food for his siblings. Jin apologized for the delay and handed her the overdue rent. The grandmother told him he could have paid it later, as she had planned to ask for only half the rent given his difficult circumstances. Jin told her there was no need for that, but her grandson, Chang Su, interjected, saying that in times like these, people should help each other, and Jin should accept her offer. The grandmother hit Chang Su with her chopsticks and told him to stay out of it, reminding him that it was her house, and she didn't need anyone to speak as though they owned it. Chang Su groaned in pain and complained, saying that chopsticks were meant for food, not for breaking skulls, adding that the house would eventually be his after her death. The grandmother became even angrier, raising the chopsticks threateningly and told him she had suffered all night from stomach pain because he neglected his studies and spent his time fooling around. Chang Su defended himself, saying what he was doing wasn't fooling around but rather studying combat techniques for hunters in preparation for his future awakening. The grandmother retorted sarcastically that if everyone learned on their own, there would be no need for universities. Chang Su countered by saying that this was the era of awakened individuals and hunters, who were the foundation of this world. He added that his grandmother didn't understand anything about this. The grandmother turned to Jin, asking him to say a few words to enlighten her grandson, but at that moment, Jin's phone began to ring. Jin saw that the caller was the person he had been waiting to hear from, so he stepped away from the conversation about Chang Su and the importance of studying. He went outside to answer the call, speaking with his friend Chaeol Min, who informed him that he had spoken with the team leader and arranged a meeting for him. Jin was overjoyed and asked Chaeol Min if what he said was true. Chaeol Min confirmed it but explained that the work wouldn't be paid. However, if Jin performed well, he would be accepted as a regular team member, even if his role was a minor one. Jin eagerly agreed. Chaeol Min was surprised by Jin's sudden change in attitude, noting that he had never accepted simple roles like carrying tools before. Jin silently reflected that he didn't really care about the role, but was doing this to help Chaeol Min. Jin replied, saying that the difficulty of work in Hyena had increased, and he was exploring other options. Chaeol Min told him the team would be leaving at 8 a.m. tomorrow, and Jin needed to be at the western gate by 7 a.m. at the latest. Jin felt relieved that his plan was progressing as intended, realizing he had taken his first steps toward achieving his goal. The next morning, Jin arrived at the western gate of the wall, waiting for the rest of the team. A voice called out to him, interrupting his thoughts about copying the defensive members' abilities and heading straight to the association. It was Chaeol Min, laughing at Jin's enthusiasm and noting that Jin had arrived early, just as instructed. Jin greeted Chaeol Min and laughed along with him while continuing to think about registering as a defense member, which would provide him with the resources he needed. Chaeol Min led Jin to the team leader, introducing Jin as the person he had mentioned the day before. The leader approached Jin, introducing himself as Yu Sang-ji, a defense member and the team's leader, and asked Jin to speak comfortably since there was a significant age gap between them. Jin replied that if Chaeol Min considered him an older brother, then he would as well, adding that he was very excited to work with him today. Sang-ji responded that he also looked forward to working with Jin, shaking hands with both of them. At that moment, Jin felt immense joy as his copying ability began to activate, transferring Sang-ji's skills to him. The system displayed a list of skills, the first of which was a unique skill, Compressed Iron Skin, at level 1. It provided over 1,000 defense points, absorbed 10% of incoming damage, and could be used without being registered in the skill list. The second unique skill was Latif Shield Strike, at level 11, which attacked the enemy with a shield, attracting their attention, dealing 300 points of cumulative damage, and increasing aggro rate by 95%. It could be used without being added to the skill package, but had a 30-minute cooldown and full energy consumption. The third skill was Destruction Card, at level 5, which released an aura that frightened enemies, drew their attention, increased aggro rate by 130%, and reduced the target's attack power by 10%. It was executed instantly with a 1-hour cooldown and no specific energy consumption. Jin chose to copy the Destruction and Iron Skin skills, and the system began integrating them into his database. After a while, the system announced that the skill copying process was successful and that the copied skills were now available in his skill list. Jin was ecstatic, especially since the handshake took only a brief moment, yet the copying process occurred at incredible speed during that time. Sang-ji noticed Jin's inexplicable happiness and found it strange. Chaeol Min also noticed and asked Jin what he was doing. Surprised that the question was directed at him, Jin listened as Chaeol Min continued, asking about Jin's suspicious smile. Sang-ji laughed and commented that Jin's grip was unusually strong for someone of his appearance. Jin quickly withdrew his hand, but Sang-ji reassured him, encouraging him to give his best effort in the mission. Sang-ji told him it was time to head to the vehicle waiting nearby. Jin looked at the vehicle and saw several people inside. He guessed they were probably the team members accompanying him on the mission. They all appeared extremely powerful, with impressive abilities. Sang-ji instructed Jin to greet his team members before setting out on the mission. Jin noticed that everyone around him was a first-class awakened individual, which meant that as soon as he began copying their rare and unique abilities, they would no longer remain exceptional awakened individuals, and their abilities would become obsolete. Still, even if he had to erase these skills later, he knew he needed to copy them now. Jin boards the vehicle with the team, and it begins moving toward their destination. During the ride, Jin manages to copy about 13 skills. He notices that some of the team members possess healing skills, realizing how invaluable such abilities could be for him. Additionally, there are mapping and trap-setting skills that Jin also wants to acquire. Along with these, he identifies 7 combat skills, all of which are incredibly impressive. Jin feels that joining this mission might have been one of the best decisions he's made, as acquiring these skills would allow him to play the roles of healer, defender, attacker, mapper, and trap setter. After some time, the team arrives at their destination, an abandoned area evacuated due to the presence of monsters. As soon as they arrive, the monsters begin attacking the hunters. Sang-ji uses his shield defense to prevent the monsters from escaping. Jin reflects on the limited number of skills he can store in his skill package, realizing that having a diverse skill set would make him stronger depending on how he coordinates them. While Jin is deep in thought, Sang-ji calls out to Lee Dong-hyuk and signals him to initiate their attack plan. Dong-hyuk acknowledges the signal and begins his assault, shooting arrows with great precision. Each arrow hits vital points. Then, Sang-ji calls out to Seo Yejin, who was sniping from a rooftop, instructing her to quickly eliminate the monsters. Seo complies, firing a powerful and swift arrow at the strongest monster. The monster fails to escape and is struck fatally, falling dead immediately. Sang-ji informs the team that only 2 monsters remain. Jin observes from a distance, realizing there's nothing else for him to do, so he decides to use the time to register the skills. If he registers them now, he won't be able to make any changes for the next 24 hours. Jin's original plan was to register as a hunter after completing this mission, but he realizes there's no need to wait any longer. After the mission concludes, Sang-ji approaches his team members and congratulates them on completing another mission without any issues. He praises Jin, noting that his endurance was commendable, especially considering the unusually high number of byproducts they collected today compared to previous missions. These situations are typically tough on porters due to the heavy weight, which often leaves them exhausted. He points out one of the porters struggling under the heavy load. At that moment, Cheol-min chimes in, telling Sang-ji that Jin was well known in high school for his strength and grip. Sang-ji expresses mild admiration and asks Cheol-min if he's referring to the time before the Great Catastrophe. Cheol-min confirms, adding that before the disaster, Jin had incredible reflexes and, without any training, managed to outperform athletes who were considered his rivals. Sang-ji jokingly asks if that means Jin was a troublemaker who bullied others. Cheol-min clarifies, saying that calling Jin a troublemaker would be an exaggeration, noting that Jin only fought bad people and had dreamed of becoming a detective when he grew up. He adds that if the world hadn't changed as it did, Jin would have undoubtedly become an exceptional detective. Sang-ji hands Jin some money as a reward for his efforts. Jin strongly objects, saying he can't accept it since he agreed not to take any payment beforehand, but Sang-ji insists, asking Jin to accept it and simply say thank you. He points out that Jin was instrumental in their success today, and that the porter wouldn't have been able to manage the load alone. Sang-ji asks Jin if he has considered becoming a full-time porter for hunters. He tells Jin that if he's open to it, he can recommend him to join a suitable team. Jin thanks him and says he'll definitely think about the offer. Sang-ji leaves, telling Jin they should meet again if the opportunity arises. Cheol-min reminds Jin of his promise to treat him to a barbecue. Jin replies that it won't happen this time, as he has important matters to take care of first, but promises to treat him the next time they meet. Cheol-min teases Jin, saying he's not used to seeing him this busy, but Jin refuses to reveal where he's headed. At the Awakened Association building in the Seoul branch, inside one of the offices dedicated to registering hunters in the Defender category, the secretary was visibly surprised by what Jin had just told her. She asked him with a puzzled expression to repeat himself and clarify what he had just said. Jin responded that he had come to register himself as an Awakened. The secretary informed him that this office was exclusively for registering Defenders, and asked if he was sure he belonged to that category. Jin confidently confirmed, stating that he had awakened as a Defender earlier that day. The secretary stared at him in astonishment for a moment before speaking again. Jin asked if there was a problem, or if something had gone wrong. The secretary reassured him that there was no issue but admitted her surprise, as Jin was the first Defender to awaken in the past 6 months. She congratulated him nonetheless, and then asked if he had brought his identification card. Jin replied that he had, and handed it over for her to see. The secretary asked him to take a seat and rest for a moment until his name was called. Jin complied, sitting down and waiting for his turn. As he waited, Jin began reflecting on his past and the life he had lived before. He sighed deeply, feeling as though he were still in a dream, unable to fully grasp how far back in time he had returned. Memories of his time in prison resurfaced, along with the visits from his siblings, which ended tragically with their deaths in a car accident. He recalled the anguish he felt during those times, the tears he shed, and the crushing grief and helplessness that consumed him. The death of his siblings had been the primary catalyst for his descent into villainy in the first place. However, after returning to the past and seeing them alive and well, his emotions shifted entirely, bringing him immense joy. At first, he thought it was all a dream and didn't want to wake up. Now, he was determined not to lose the people he loved again. He resolved to use all his strength to protect them, sparing no effort in doing so. During these moments of contemplation, Jin activated his ability, opening the system interface. Based on the reports, he noted that endurance levels typically ranged from 6,000 to 15,000 on average, while strength levels ranged from about 2,000 to 5,000. This meant that 15,000 endurance and 5,000 strength were the upper limits for a first awakening. However, he noticed a new feature labeled Core Generation, which he had no idea how to interpret or utilize. Jin recalled that Ki Cheol hadn't mentioned anything about this, but he figured he would uncover its purpose sooner or later. At that moment, the secretary called out the name Choi Jin-hyuk. Jin was startled, his thoughts interrupted, and he turned toward the secretary who had called him. She was accompanied by a man in a white coat, returning Jin's identification card, and informed him that they had completed verifying his identity and could now proceed with the next steps. She asked Jin to follow the specialist to complete the remaining tests. The specialist extended his hand to Jin for a handshake, introducing himself as Lim Ji-hoon. Jin reciprocated the gesture, introducing himself as Choi Jin-hyuk, and expressing his pleasure at meeting him. Ji-hoon told Jin that everything was prepared, and they could start the tests immediately. Jin followed Ji-hoon to the testing location, and they got into a vehicle together. Jin noted that Ji-hoon was an ordinary person, and not an awakened, which meant Jin couldn't copy any abilities from him. Although Ji-hoon's work with the association had initially led Jin to believe he might be awakened, Jin soon realized that regular individuals also worked as part of the association's staff. Finally, they arrived at the testing chamber, where Ji-hoon informed Jin that the test would consist of 3 stages. The first stage would assess his endurance and physical strength levels. Once the specialist Lim finishes preparing Jin for the test, he informs him that everything is ready, and they can begin. Jin sits firmly in the testing chair as the machines start running. Lim reassures him, saying the process won't take more than 10 minutes, and encourages him to relax and remain calm. After completing this stage, they proceed to the second phase, which involves testing Jin's special skill, Shield Strike. In this stage, a simulation model of a monster is used, and Jin is required to engage it in combat. Lim and the team observe Jin's performance from the control room. Lim explains to Jin that the test will also measure stress levels, and assures him that it's a straightforward process. Jin understands that his task is to use his special skill to attack the simulated monster, regardless of which part of it he hits, emphasizing that he shouldn't hesitate during the attack. Jin initiates his shield strike skill and attacks the monster with great force. The specialists in the observation room are astonished by the sheer power and intensity of Jin's strikes. Next, they move to the final stage, the overall evaluation. Lim offers Jin a warm drink and informs him that due to certain circumstances, the evaluators for this stage have been delayed, and the evaluation has been postponed for 2 days. Jin takes the drink and asks if this means they're done for the day. Lim confirms that everything has been completed. Lim then directs Jin to the office to collect the basic equipment he'll need. Jin expresses his gratitude and disbelief, saying he can't believe the day has finally come for him to receive the association's gear. Lim responds, sharing his concern about the decreasing number of awakened defenders and healers. He explains that the numbers have significantly dropped compared to 5 years ago, after the Great Catastrophe. Lim points out that while those awakened through forced awakening stones help meet rank requirements, most of them become fighters or supporters. He further explains that awakening stones related to defenders and healers are exceptionally rare. Lim adds that the biggest issue is that even with awakening stones, there's no guarantee that a person will awaken successfully. Jin knows this, and feels fortunate to have awakened differently, especially considering his past life as a wanted criminal. He acknowledges that as a criminal, he wouldn't have been able to register as an awakened individual again. Lim notices he's been talking too much, and apologizes to Jin, explaining that he hasn't met a defender in a long time, which made him more enthusiastic than usual, despite not being much of a talker. Jin reassures him that he wasn't bothered by the conversation. Lim reminds Jin that the third stage evaluation is scheduled for 2 days later, and asks him to return at the time specified in the message he'll receive tomorrow. Jin smiles happily upon hearing this. Looking at Lim's outstretched hand, he shakes it warmly, smiling with excitement, and says he's looking forward to returning and eagerly anticipates their next meeting. After completing his procedures at the association center, Jin leaves and begins his journey home. He tries calling his friend, Cheol-min, to share what happened, all while carrying the association bag filled with the basic equipment he'll need as an awakened individual. Cheol-min finally answers the call after a while, and Jin asks if he can talk now. Cheol-min responds by asking if it's something important. Jin replies that it's nothing urgent but shares that he awakened as a defender today, and is currently on his way home. Cheol-min is shocked, unable to believe it, and asks if Jin is joking or being serious. Jin assures him that he wouldn't joke about something like this. Jin enters a building while continuing the conversation, glancing around to confirm he's at the right place. Still in disbelief, Cheol-min asks again if Jin really awakened as a defender, and not something else. Jin reassures him, saying he wouldn't lie about such an important matter, and confirms his awakening as a defender. Cheol-min expresses his astonishment, commenting on how they were together just recently, and how such a monumental event could happen so quickly. Jin pauses momentarily, staring at a ridiculously overpriced item on display, sarcastically thinking to himself that anyone willing to pay 3 million for it must be crazy. After a brief network interruption, Cheol-min reconnects and hears Jin explaining that he went to the association today, registered as an awakened member, and was informed that he would undergo a defender evaluation test in 3 days. Jin notes that observing seasoned hunters could help him a lot. He asks Cheol-min if he can join them again, even as a porter. Cheol-min responds, saying he already saw them earlier today. Jin comments that he was too preoccupied carrying items to properly observe Sang-ji during the battle. Jin laughs heartily as he finally finds the item he was looking for, feeling a sense of victory and satisfaction. Cheol-min tells him he'll explain the situation to Sang-ji and get back to him later. Jin takes the bracelet he found and approaches the vendor, telling him he'll purchase it along with an elixir. Jin recalls from his memory that this bracelet was an artifact previously owned by Jaden Russell, who was ranked 3rd among villains. He remembers how, before his return to the past, when he was an 8th ranked villain, he had met Jaden, who explained the bracelet's properties and how to use it. The vendor eyes Jin suspiciously, but says nothing. Jin notices the strange gaze and remembers Jaden's explanation about the bracelet, including how merely possessing it increases skill efficiency by 30%. Jin asks the vendor why he's staring at him and if there's an issue. The vendor apologizes and asks if he can pose a question, wondering if Jin awakened today. Jin confirms this, only to be caught off guard when the vendor suddenly prepares to punch him. Jin tries to block it but notices the punch stopping just before it reaches him. The vendor explains that he knew about Jin's awakening and reveals that he too is an awakened individual with teleportation ability. Jin feels slightly embarrassed, realizing the vendor's intention wasn't to attack him, but to greet him in a unique way. Jin reciprocates the greeting and successfully copies the vendor's teleportation skill. At that moment, another person appears, introducing himself to Jin as Huang Manso, also an awakened individual with spatial manipulation abilities. Huang extends his hand for a handshake, expressing his pleasure at meeting Jin. Jin shakes his hand, responding that he's equally pleased to meet them, and feeling thrilled to acquire the ability he had been needing. The vendor comments that he overheard Jin's phone conversation and learned about his upcoming defender evaluation test. He adds that being a defender is considered a noble classification among the awakened, jokingly saying he feels envious of Jin. Jin replies that he never expected to meet awakened individuals in this place at all, and he asks if this work is a side job alongside their hunting careers. The vendor responds that it's actually his main job. Jin is surprised, but the vendor explains that the abundance of support class awakened individuals has made it difficult for him to find work in that field. And since his ability isn't useful in combat, he resorted to opening a small shop to sell supplies and artifacts to make a living. Jin reflects on the hardships of life, even for the awakened, as the vendor hands him the elixir, saying the price for both the elixir and the bracelet is 350,000, but he'll sell them together for 300,000. Jin thanks the vendor and realizes that he now has nearly everything he needs, including the elixir, the bracelet, and the D-class crystals he has at home. He feels he's gathered most of what he was looking for. Jin puts on the bracelet, called the Twilight Bracelet. As soon as he wears it, system notifications appear, stating that artifact number 38 out of 101 items created by the original system master has been unsealed, added to the system as a registered item, and that a total of 16 artifacts are now listed in the artifact registry. The bracelet is now fully owned by Choi Jin-hyuk, the new system master. However, Jin feels puzzled by the text and doesn't understand what is meant by 101 items created by the system master. At that moment, his phone rings, interrupting his thoughts. Jin answers the call after seeing the caller's name, realizing it's his friend Cheol Min. Jin quickly picks up and asks why he's calling. Cheol Min tells him that he spoke to the team leader, Sang Ji, about Jin's request, but the leader found the idea ridiculous and unbelievable, saying he'd only believe it if he saw the change himself. Jin laughs and tells Cheol Min he scared him for a moment, as he thought he was about to say the request was rejected. Cheol Min laughs back, teasing Jin for being so earnest. Meanwhile, Jin activates his newly acquired spatial manipulation ability and creates a subspace. Cheol Min informs Jin that their meeting is scheduled for 7 a.m. at Gate 7, the same gate from their last mission, and reminds him not to be late. Jin retrieves his bag of basic equipment from the subspace and assures Cheol Min that he won't be late, bidding him goodbye and saying he'll see him tomorrow. The next day, Jin arrives at the meeting spot and finds the entire team already there. He greets them, but their faces are filled with surprise and amazement, as they see him standing before them in his new gear and combat attire. Cheol Min looks at Jin in disbelief, remarking that the new outfit confirms he really did awaken as a defender, and that it's no joke. Sang Ji also expresses his astonishment, even though Cheol Min had mentioned the matter to him earlier. He asks Jin what could have possibly happened in one day to bring about such a drastic change. Jin, slightly embarrassed, responds that he suddenly awakened as a defender while heading home yesterday. Captain Sang Ji responds, saying he's aware that natural awakening rates have dropped significantly recently, and what happened with Jin is truly remarkable. Jin replies that he mentioned this to Cheol Min, but is still waiting for his defender evaluation test tomorrow. Therefore, he decided to join the team today to observe Captain Sang Ji as he gives commands. Believing that such an experience could benefit him, he apologizes if his request causes any inconvenience. Captain Sang Ji replies, saying he's unsure if there's anything he can teach Jin, but he offers a simple piece of advice as someone who started this job before him. The captain asks Jin if he knows the real reason for carrying a shield, emphasizing that it's not just about being a defender, but about choosing to be one. He adds that during battles with monsters, there will be moments when Jin feels exhausted and drained. In those specific moments, what will help him stand back up won't be his stats or abilities, but his determination and resolve. After these motivational words, Jin sets off with the team toward their mission site, which is located in a school courtyard. There, they spot a massive monster resembling a giant bear. Each team member takes their position and temporarily hides. Captain Sang Ji asks if they've identified the monster and its type, to which the team responds affirmatively. He orders Jang Daijin to verify the monster's location using his ability. Daijin uses his map-making skill, and a detailed map of the area and the monster's position appears before the captain. Captain Sang Ji examines the map and informs the team that the monster's type and location have been identified. He announces that there are actually two monsters, not just one, and both are from an advanced class. However, their attack power is low, and their movement is slow. On the other hand, their defenses are equivalent to E-class monsters. Cheol Min expresses concern, worried that the team might not be strong enough to handle the monsters. Dong Hyuk replies, saying he already feels exhausted even before the mission begins. He asks how long it might take to break through the monster's shields, and adds that attacking one of them could provoke the other to retaliate from the gym as well. Sang Ji acknowledges this possibility, but points out the monster's slow movement. He adds that their team is one of the most experienced in handling such situations, and as long as they stick to the plan, they won't face any obstacles. The team's healer assures them that monsters with weak attacks won't be an issue today, although the fighters might face some difficulties. Captain Sang Ji asks Jicheol if the traps are in their designated locations, and Jicheol confirms that everything is ready. The captain orders Cheol Min and Dong Hyuk to join him, while instructing Haeseo and Jin Hyuk to stay in their positions until further orders. The team moves to confront the monsters, but Jin feels a growing sense of unease. His worry intensifies, especially as he recalls what he heard about the complete annihilation of Captain Sang Ji's group, which was caused by the unexpected appearance of another monster during the mission. Jin thinks that if the mentioned monster is similar to the ones present now, the group shouldn't struggle to defeat it. Jin feels something is off as he glances toward the building, sensing a missing link in the plan. As Captain Sang Ji begins executing his strategy, he asks Seo Yi-ji if she's in position to fire. She responds that she's ready. The captain gives her the signal, and she immediately fires a powerful and swift arrow at the monster. However, the arrow fails to penetrate the monster's sturdy shield, causing no damage. Yi-ji announces that she'll move to another position since the first attack was ineffective. The captain expresses frustration, remarking that things are unfolding exactly as he anticipated, and the mission won't be easy. The monster awakens from its slumber, enraged and ready to attack. The captain shouts a warning to the team, alerting them that the monster is on on the move and ordering them to execute the plan quickly. Cheol-min and Dong-hyuk respond that they're fully prepared. The monster advances toward them and begins attacking ferociously. Dong-hyuk attempts to target weak points not covered by the shield, and succeeds in landing 3 direct hits with his arrows. The monster roars in pain, momentarily halting its attack. Feeling confident, Dong-hyuk believes he's made significant progress, but Captain Sang-ji warns him to stay focused and maintain a safe distance. Ignoring the captain's instructions, Dong-hyuk declares that he'll move closer to finish the mission quickly because he's feeling exhausted. He rushes toward the monster, firing several additional arrows before the creature collapses to the ground. Dong-hyuk expresses his desire to wrap up the mission and go home to rest. He continues bombarding the monster with arrows, disregarding the captain's warnings. He responds to the captain, saying the monster is too slow to retaliate effectively. To everyone's surprise, the monster suddenly lunges at Dong-hyuk with immense force, landing a direct hit that sends him flying into a wall with tremendous impact. Cheol-min fears for Dong-hyuk's safety, but cannot leave his position. As the monster approaches Dong-hyuk, Cheol-min informs the captain that he's joining the fight. Cheol-min leaps high into the air and delivers a sharp strike with his weapon at the monster, managing to pierce its robust shield. However, the damage is minimal. Cheol-min realizes the shield's incredible durability, making the monster a formidable opponent. The monster continues advancing toward Dong-hyuk, preparing to deliver a fatal blow with its sharp claws. Dong-hyuk is paralyzed with fear, unable to escape or defend himself. In a critical moment, Captain Sang-ji rushes in with incredible speed, intercepting the monster's attack with a powerful strike from his shield. The force of the blow pushes the monster back, providing a moment of relief. The monster quickly recovers, becoming even more aggressive and violent in its attacks. Captain Sang-ji struggles to fend off its blows while issuing commands to the team. He instructs Cheol-min to prepare for a close-range assault while assigning Dong-hyuk and Yi-ji to maintain ranged attacks. The captain uses his ability to draw the monster's full attention to himself. The monster ferociously attacks Sang-ji, delivering a series of powerful, relentless strikes. Sang-ji uses his shield with all his strength to block the onslaught. Meanwhile, the rest of the team joins the battle, launching deadly arrows at the monster in an effort to break its tough defenses and defeat it. Dong-hyuk signals Yi-ji that it's the perfect moment to fire. Without hesitation, Yi-ji fires an arrow with precision at the monster, hitting it directly in the head. However, the attack isn't lethal enough. The monster shifts into a defensive stance, shielding itself with its robust armor. Seizing the opportunity, Captain Sang-ji calls on Cheol-min for a close-range strike. The team attacks from different angles, coordinating their strikes against the monster. The captain orders the team to continue their primary assaults until he provides new instructions. Cheol-min, while struggling to break the monster's defense, comments that just looking at its shield is exhausting. He and Captain Sang-ji continue their relentless attacks as Jin closely observes their efforts. The healer remarks that if they're lucky enough, the mission should end here. However, she expresses her frustration that their team always gets the toughest assignments. Jin is surprised by her comment and asks what she means. The healer explains that armored monsters are extremely rare, and a lucky hunter might encounter them once or twice a year. Curious, Jin asks how many times their team has faced armored monsters. She replies that their team has encountered them 3 times in the past 6 months, calling it sheer bad luck. She adds that Jin seems quite eager to learn, given the number of questions he's asking. Jin apologizes if he's bothering her, but she pulls out a small device and hands it to him. Jin asks about the device and its purpose. She explains that it's called the Garam M7, a measurement device developed by the Garam company. She suggests that since Jin is here to observe monster hunting strategies in preparation for his test, observation alone might not be sufficient. She advises him to use the device to analyze statistics and combat details, which could help him in his test and future endeavors. The healer explains that the armored monster has 30,000 health points, while its shield boasts 150,000 defense points, a staggeringly high level compared to most monsters. Jin, feeling frustrated, remarks that it would take a lifetime to break through such a shield. At that moment, the mapmaker announces a serious issue. The life signals of the team sent to handle the second monster have suddenly vanished from the map. Captain Sang-ji is stunned and demands an explanation for the sudden disappearance of Song-nam's entire team. Jin, sensing something is wrong, looks toward the building where the team had been stationed. He notices the building shaking violently. Suddenly, the wall collapses, and a strange creature emerges. It turns out to be a giant mantis heading straight for the team. Jin immediately realizes the gravity of the situation and the difficulty the team will face in dealing with this new threat. The team members panic, knowing they haven't yet defeated the first monster and now must contend with a second one. They ask how much time remains before the mantis reaches them and discover they have less than 2 minutes. Captain Sang-ji shouts, ordering Jin-hyuk and Hae-seo to leave the area immediately and find a safer location. At that moment, Jin understands that the sense of danger he had earlier was due to the presence of this deadly mantis in the vicinity. The captain commands Ji Cheol to prepare the binding traps and Yi-ji to stay in position and be ready. Jin grabs Hae-seo's hand, urging her to leave the dangerous area quickly. Hae-seo nervously agrees, saying, "Okay," but is shocked when Jin leads her toward Captain Sang-ji and the second armored monster instead of retreating. She asks him why they're heading in that direction, and he replies that retreating at this distance is practically impossible. If the monster catches them, it will tear them apart. Captain Sang-ji notices Jin approaching and yells at him, ordering him to fall back as instructed earlier. Jin confidently responds that retreat is no longer an option because the mantis is much faster than them. He adds that dealing with the armored monster would take over 30 minutes, and if the mantis joins the fight, they'll all be wiped out. Meanwhile, the giant mantis flies rapidly toward the team. It reaches Jin's position, where he stands holding his shield, ready for the attack. Jin turns to the team and tells them that their only option now is to hold their ground for as long as possible.